Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and this is going to be another update of what's going on in the Middle East. As you know, Israel did a retaliatory strike on Iran, and I'm going to be playing some updates. This update is from Fox News dealing with potential nuclear facilities that Israel potentially hit, but it also seems as though they were hitting facilities in Syria. So let me play this from Fox News.
And good evening. I'm Trace Gallagher. It's 10 p.m. on the East Coast, 7 o'clock here in Los Angeles. And this is a breaking news edition of Fox News at night. There are reports coming in that Israel has now begun its highly anticipated retaliatory strikes against Iran. Now, we are tracking these developments, and we are hearing that explosions have been heard over Iran proper, as well as in southern Syria, and explosions heard above Iraq. We do not know if any areas of Iraq were hit. We think there were some explosions in southern Syria, and there are reports of possibility of strikes in southern Iran near the Natanz and the Fordow nuclear facilities. Remember, these are the facilities that are said to be places that you can produce nuclear weapons. They also have a uranium conversion facility in Isfahan. And this is also in southern Iran, and there are reports that there have been airstrikes in that area as well. Let's get live on the ground now to Tel Aviv. That's where Trey Yinks joins us live. Trey, what are you hearing? What are we learning?
What if I told you investing wasn't just for the suits and ties? It's for everyday folk.
Yeah, hey, Trace, good evening. Right now, we are following reports out of the region of airstrikes taking place in Iran, Iraq, and Syria. The Israelis at this moment have not confirmed that this is the retaliation to that massive Iranian drone and missile attack last weekend. But here's what we know. Some outlets citing American officials. And again, these are preliminary reports based on the information that we are gathering right now. We've reached out to Israeli defense officials and are waiting for comment. Local media is reporting explosions in the Iranian city of Isfahan. Isfahan sits about 200 miles to the south of the Iranian capital of Tehran. At this location, there is an Iranian nuclear facility. There are also reports of activity at other locations across Iran.
I just want to interject here. If this is true, assuming this is true, Netanyahu is probably going to go down in history as one of the best Israeli presidents ever if he knocked out the nuclear facility in Iran. This is something that the United States was afraid to do. And if they crippled the nuclear capability of Iran, this changes the dynamic drastically in the Middle East. And this is something that he's been talking about for 20 years. And here again, if this is true, you see in how events in a chaotic situation could radically turn for people. Something positive can turn negative, or something negative can turn positive.
This is significant because, remember, the initial reporting leading up to tonight had to do with what might be a limited Israeli response to this large-scale attack last weekend conducted by the Iranians. So in terms of the targets that were likely hit in any sort of strike and retaliation from the Israelis, you are looking at nuclear research facilities, additionally, any sort of IRGC locations across the Middle East in places like Syria and Iraq, and then Iranian-backed proxies across the region. And so Iran-backed Iraqi and Syrian Shia militias certainly would be on that target list for the Israelis. The Israelis looking to send a message to Iran, if this is confirmed that they are behind these strikes, not to ever attack directly from Iranian territory toward Israel, and also to ensure that they will keep control of their proxies across the region. The big concern here has to do with Iranian nuclear aspirations. And I want to break down something very important here, Trace, because if it is confirmed that Isfahan was one of the targets for the Israelis tonight in this retaliation, it is significant for two reasons. We'll point back to June of last year when the UN nuclear watchdog was concerned that they went into a probe and found uranium particles that were enriched up to 83%, just short of the 90% weapons grade material line. An indication that Iran is getting very close to the ability to create a nuclear weapon. Other watchdogs over the past several months have said the Iranian breakout time for such a weapon is basically zero. And this means Iran, in response to this, may not react militarily, but could say they are changing their nuclear doctrine. One other important note here, Trace, when we look at the Iranian attack last weekend, Iran, for the first time.
This is why I've been saying kicking the can down the road will make the world less stable. It is time to get the job done, and that is destroying Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. Now, that means the military apparatus. It doesn't mean the Iranian people, but the military apparatus is the one that's raising the terror threats in the Middle East. And therefore, Esau needs to die. It's the battle between the soul roots of Jacob and Esau. We're seeing it in real time here.
In their country's history, fired on Israel directly with what appear to be Shahab ballistic missiles. These are the missiles that if Iran were to create a nuclear warhead, they would use to target any country around the world. And they used this missile last weekend without a nuclear warhead, and they were successful in targeting Israel. So again, tonight, we are unable to confirm.
Wouldn't it be ironic with so many people that are being pacifists in the United States or anti-Zionist, where they now see an Israeli president knocking out the nuclear capability, potentially knocking out the nuclear capability of Iran or drastically hindering it, versus what the United States policy has been over the years, going all the way back to the Obama administration, which was an appeasement policy. That literally a Netanyahu potentially has made the world in the long run, if this nuclear facility has been knocked out, this strike may have prevented Iran from getting to escape velocity with nuclear weapons. And this operation helped the world move towards a more peaceful existence in the long run. Obviously, it's not in the short run. But the thing is the pacifists that are taking place in the truther movement, the pacifists that are taking place in the strategic apparatus in the intelligentsia of the United States, the pacifism that was going on in the Biden's administration and in the Obama's administration, those are policies that would make the world less safe because it gave enough runway for Iran to actually develop nuclear weapons. But by knocking them out, now we don't have, if this did take place, in the long run, it's going to be more peaceful in the Middle East. Can you imagine if they had nuclear weapons, what our strategic deterrence would be in the Middle East? Especially, with Iran and Saudi Arabia are not on the same, they're not on the same side. They're adversaries. Saudi Arabia would have to go nuclear. It's the same problem between Pakistan and India. Now, most truthers and most pacifists in the United States will demonize Israel for what they have done. But they don't realize that if the nuclear facilities have been knocked out, this is actually a blessing for the whole world.
The reports at this moment but initial reporting indicates explosions in Iran, Iraq, and Syria, and this does come on the heels of the threats of Israeli retaliation following that Iranian attack last weekend that included ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones.
Trey, and if I can ask you about the diplomacy here, Trey, very quickly, because there were reports coming out of Cottrell today saying that the United States said they would okay Israel going into Rafah, a mission in Rafah, if they did not retaliate against Iran. So is it your understanding that
I don't think the United States should be telling Netanyahu what to do. I think Netanyahu should basically say this: we're going to get the job done. And in the long run, it's going to be better for everybody. And just shut the fuck up.
appears as of late today, the United States was not privy to any information about this attack, or is it just too soon to know?
Top resume mistakes, brought to you by myperfectresume.com. Mistake number 2.
It's too soon to know, but we should note the Israelis were coordinating closely with the Americans and an informal coalition to respond to that Iranian ballistic missile and drone attack last weekend. Now, this is an important note here because in the past, there have been no formal agreements for the United States and others to shoot down incoming missiles or drones toward Israel. But there was a clear coordinated effort. And according to briefings that I was a part of with top Israeli Air Force officials, the training for the mission to shoot down these missiles and drones went on for months prior to the Iranian attack. So we do have reason to believe that the Israelis have been in close coordination with the Americans and that they would inform the United States ahead of any sort of action against targets in Iran. At this moment, and you might be able to hear overhead, the civilian airspace over Israel is not closed, but we are following and tracking civilian flights toward Iran and can confirm that some civilian airliners actually turned back from the Gulf. They were headed toward the Iranian capital of Tehran and made a U-turn amid these reports of Israeli strikes in Iranian territory. The Israelis will certainly want to act with decisive actions. They want to catch the Iranians off guard, unlike what we saw in the weeks prior ahead of the Iranian attack against Israel. Because again, the Israelis are looking to send a clear message to the Iranians that any sort of direct attack toward Israeli territory would not be accepted. I also want to note one other thing following a briefing with Israeli Air Force officials. They say they are on high alert across this country, fearing Iranian retaliation. Everyone from Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, to President Ibrahim Raisi, to some top IRGC officials this week, made clear that they would react what they called immediately to any sort of Israeli response to the attack over the weekend.
So this is an important feature. Where is the Iranian response from the Israeli attack? This attack. And will it be, a proxy kind of an attack through Hezbollah? Or maybe a coordinated attack with Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis and the Iranians, or just the Iranians? See, here's the problem, what's going on in Iran. They have to try to be tough in the neighborhood, but they also have domestic problems. And I don't think it would take that much effort to actually overthrow the theocracy in Iran. So, it's not just them retaliating. It's not just Iran retaliating for this strike that Israel made, but also the internal conflict that's going on within its own social system.
The air defense, as we speak, Trace, is on high alert across this country. Everything from the Iron Dome that would pick up fire from places like southern Lebanon, with Iran's largest proxy in the region, Hezbollah, and then some of the larger air defense systems like David's Sling and the Arrow system that we actually saw here in Tel Aviv during that Iranian attack last weekend, active, intercepting some of those incoming drones and ballistic missiles. The question tonight is, what were the targets in this apparent Israeli response to the Iranian attack last weekend? Again, the Israelis have a variety of targets that could hit not just inside Iranian territory, but across the region, understanding that Iran's IRGC has bases in places like Iraq and Syria, and they're also supporting Shia militias that are operating in those areas that give them.
And that may be the reason why there was reports of bombs or explosions going off. Now the explosions, if they were in the air, most likely were air defense capabilities on the ground in Iraq and in Syria. But I wouldn't be surprised that maybe there were also attacks, not just to Iran, but maybe to some of these outposts in Syria and in Iraq that the Israelis targeted.
What has been described to Fox News as an octopus's tentacles across the Middle East, stretching Iranian influence not only to threaten Israel, but also to threaten American forces across the region. Because as we saw since the October 7th massacre and the regional tension that followed, numerous attacks against American bases across the Middle East. And so part of this response.
And just think about this. Look at the havoc that Iran has created with commerce in the region, shipping lanes, the knocking, the threats they did with drone attacks through their proxies, and they don't have nuclear weapons, right? Now, just imagine the calculus when they do have nuclear weapons. It's a lot different. And this is why I keep on saying, get the job done now before unconventional means are had by the Iranians. The Iranians, as a people, are pretty smart people. And when you start playing around with chemical, biologics, radiologics in warfare, on top of the cyber type stuff, that's a totally different game versus conventional means. And they've been pretty effective with this drone warfare. Now we're seeing in real time the new tactics of tank warfare and naval warfare with drones. But can you just imagine when you add that with unconventional means? So it's unacceptable. The American policy that we've had since Obama's administration, and probably people could say going all the way back to the Carter administration, but the policy that we have with Iran is only leading to more instability in the region. We got to get the job done. We got to get it done. Americans have a failed policy of appeasement, a failed policy of trying to negotiate unsustainable ceasefires in that region. Just let them go at it in conventional means, because if we kick the can down the road, the chances of them going at it before, going at it, in a nuclear sense or an unconventional means increases if we don't get the job done. So it's just time. It's time. And these pacifists in the United States are making the things worse. Now, I'm sure that on X and on other social media and on YouTube, there's going to be a lot of anti-Zionist rhetoric. There's going to be a lot of anti-Jewish rhetoric out there. There's going to be a lot of anti-Semitism. There's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of pacifism in the United States that we'll start to see. But the reality of the situation is this: some wars you got to fight. There's other wars that shouldn't be fought. The war between Ukraine and Russia is one of them. But this war in the Middle East is definitely one of them.
Likely to strike fear into these Iran-backed Iraqi and Syrian Shia militias that are operating across the region. And if it is confirmed in Isfahan, this city that is just about 200 miles to the south of Tehran, This would be significant because it shows the Israelis are stepping up their strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. You might remember back in 2020, it was November of 2020, the Israelis in a covert operation killed the top Iranian nuclear scientist, Mohammad Fakhrizadeh. Now, this is a man who was responsible for years when it came to Iran's nuclear program and their developments toward a nuclear weapon. Remember, when the Iran nuclear deal from 2015 collapsed, Iran started enriching uranium closer and closer to weapons-grade material. And the biggest concern for Israel was that they would ultimately create a nuclear weapon and then attach that warhead to a ballistic missile, like a missile that was fired toward Israel over the weekend, and target the Jewish state with such a projectile. We understand the breakout period is anywhere from just 0 days to a matter of days and possibly even a week, according to international observers. And the concern for Israel is that they could use this enriched uranium to create a nuclear bomb that would target this country. And so it would not be surprising if
there is no doubt in my mind, that if Israel takes the risks to defeat Iran's nuclear capability, that God will bless Israel for doing so. There is no doubt in my mind on that. What is a shame is that the United States government allowed Iran to get to this point. Now, if you are a person that is what I would classify as a pacifist, that doesn't want Israel to get the job done, ask yourself this question. Are you willing to risk the life, liberty of the United States with an Iranian nuclear country and changing the whole dynamic in the Middle East and how it works? Are you willing to pay $250 a barrel of oil and have $10 a gallon worth of gas? Are you willing to actually not have the standard of living that you're used to because of inaction, because you wanted to be a pacifist? That's where this is going. And then you're talking about people that have nuclear weapons that are based on theology, not on some sort of Western cultural philosophy. See, the soul root of Esau is hot. His temperature is hot. There's a fire within his soul. So he gets angry, he gets red, his blood boils. This is a physical manifestation of the soul root, but it's also a hint of what he is capable of when manipulating materials such as uranium. See, the soul root is a fire. And if you don't take fire away from a pyromaniac, you're going to end up having the town burned down. And that's exactly what is happening. And the United States is at fault with this because of failed policies going back to the Obama administration and perhaps even all the way to the Carter administration. Now, Iran has been, a battleground for the CIA. So the United States obviously isn't lily white in this. But our contemporary decisions on how to contain Iran has gotten us to this point. And so someone has to do the right thing, not only to protect their own nation, but actually to de-escalate a nuclear breakout by Iran. It's time. It's time to get the job done.
Target was Isfahan, this top research facility inside Iranian territory. And again, the Israelis have been very clear, everyone from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the country's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and others, that they have the targets already chosen inside Iran. and they are able to ratchet up the pressure on the Iranian regime if there is any sort of response to this counterstrike following the attack last weekend that was conducted by the Iranians.
Trey Yanks, great information.
All right, so that's Fox News take of what's going on, and my critique of you know this potentiality of knocking out some of the nuclear facilities in Iran. And really sit back. If you know someone that's a pacifist, that I'm classifying as a pacifist in the United States, you know, ask them, do you really think it's worth having Iran have a breakout in nuclear weapons capability? Or is it time to get the job done? Or if you're one of the pacifists, really think about that. Do you really want a world where you have a growing caliphate having nuclear capability? You really want that? You really think it's going to end well for Western countries? Because it won't. Please subscribe to all my channels. I have 3 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Follow me on X. Also follow me on Facebook and GETTR. All the links are in the description. Go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support my news coverage by donating through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can also purchase a plethora of health supplements. If you follow my protocol, it'll help to boost up your immune system and slow down the aging process. And if you listen to what I have to say in terms of improving your health, you will get a lot better in terms of longevity, better memory, more energy, a boosted immune system. You'll learn a lot if you just pay attention to me. So thank you for listening. And of course, there's going to be haters out there. This is going to be a trying time for people that are Jewish, but it's also a trying time for people that actually want peace in the world. And sometimes you need to realize, to have long-term peace in the world, you got to have war. Being a pacifist is not going to get the job done, because being a pacifist got us to this point. And this point is now getting extremely dangerous. Thank you for listening, and have a nice night.